Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a time in our lives when we need to stop pretending that almost enough is good enough, when we need to stop calling inconsistency mystery and bare minimum effort progress. Too many people are stuck in relationships where they're constantly negotiating for the very things that should have been given freely from the start: respect, attention, emotional presence. Tonight, I want to talk to the part of you that knows something doesn't feel right. The part of you that's tired of pretending crumbs are a full meal. This is about your worth, your peace, and your power. There's a moment in almost every emotionally draining relationship where you start to doubt yourself. It usually doesn't come loudly. It creeps in subtly, like a whisper in the back of your mind. You ask for something: honesty, time, reassurance, clarity, and the response you get makes you feel like you've just asked for the moon. You're told you're too much, too sensitive, too demanding, too intense, and slowly you begin to believe it. You question your own expectations. You start dialing down your emotions, filtering your thoughts, asking for less. You convince yourself that maybe if you were just a little easier to love, everything would fall into place. But what if that story is all wrong? What if the truth is this: your needs are not the problem? Your needs are not too big. Your needs are not a burden. They are valid, every single one of them. The need to be heard, the need to be seen, the need to feel safe when you're vulnerable, the need to know where you stand with someone, the need for consistent communication, the need to feel like you matter, not just sometimes, but always. These aren't flaws in your character. These are natural expressions of being human. Some people will try to convince you otherwise, and not always maliciously. Sometimes it's because they're simply not equipped to meet those needs. They've never had to sit with their own emotions, so yours feel like too much. They're used to surface-level connection, so your depth overwhelms them. They want to love on their terms, not yours, so any request from you feels like pressure. But their inability to meet you in your emotional truth does not mean that truth is wrong. You weren't made to live small in love. You weren't made to bite your tongue just to keep the peace. You weren't made to question whether your feelings are too loud or inconvenient. Real love doesn't punish you for your emotional honesty. It makes space for it. It doesn't ask you to shrink so that someone else can feel comfortable. It invites all of you, not just the parts that are easy to handle. And yes, it's possible to be overly dependent. It's possible to lean so heavily on someone else that it becomes their job to regulate your emotions. But that's not the same as having needs. Healthy emotional needs come from a grounded place. They're about connection, not control. They're about reciprocity, not constant reassurance. Wanting emotional presence from a partner doesn't make you clingy. Wanting someone who communicates doesn't make you needy. Wanting consistency doesn't mean you're high maintenance. These are not excessive demands. They are the building blocks of meaningful, lasting relationships. When someone tries to make you feel guilty for needing the basics, clarity, respect, tenderness, that's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of their emotional limitations. It's not your job to accept crumbs and pretend it's enough. It's not your responsibility to adjust your hunger to match what someone is willing to offer. You are allowed to want the full meal. You are allowed to want depth, alignment, presence, and effort. The moment you start telling yourself, "I shouldn't want this much," is the moment you start betraying yourself. You turn down your own volume. You start to explain away someone's inconsistency. You excuse their silence. You rationalize the confusion. You begin to see your desire for more as a flaw, when really it's a sign of emotional maturity, of courage, of knowing your worth. It's not just okay to have emotional needs. It's essential. We're wired for connection. We're built for bonding. And in any meaningful relationship, emotional intimacy is not a bonus. It's a necessity. It's the very thing that makes love feel like home instead of a performance. If you can't bring your whole heart to the table, if you have to constantly censor your desires, if your needs are always an inconvenience, then it's not love. It's tolerance, and you were never made to be tolerated. You were made to be embraced. There's a difference between being difficult and being emotionally honest. You deserve someone who can tell the difference. Someone who doesn't shut down when you open up. Someone who sees your vulnerability as a strength, not a liability. Someone who meets your emotional clarity with their own. And until that person shows up, let your needs stay loud. Let your voice remain intact. Don't apologize for wanting the very things that make relationships meaningful. Your needs are valid. They always have been. There comes a point in certain relationships where you begin to second guess everything about yourself. Not because you've suddenly become unsure, but because the way someone else is showing up, or not showing up, makes you feel like you must be the issue. You ask for something small, clarity, a call back, a little more consistency. And somehow that simple ask turns into tension, deflection, maybe even accusations that you're being difficult or needy. Over time, you internalize the message. Maybe I'm just asking for too much. Maybe I need to stop expecting things. But before you go down that spiral, ask yourself something else. What if the problem isn't what I'm asking for, but who I'm asking? When we want connection, when we care deeply, when we feel emotionally invested in someone, it's natural to want those feelings returned. We want to be seen, understood, and supported in a way that matches what we're offering. That's not unreasonable, but not everyone is in a place to give that back. Not everyone has the emotional availability, the maturity, or even the willingness to show up for someone else in a meaningful way. And that's where the distortion happens. You keep extending your heart, your time, your presence, and the person on the other end gives you just enough to stay hopeful, but never enough to feel secure. They're inconsistent, they're vague, they pull away when things get real. They give you glimpses of connection, then disappear into silence when you try to go deeper. It's like trying to build something permanent on a foundation that keeps shifting underneath you. And each time you ask for more solid ground, they act like you're being unreasonable for not adapting to the instability. So what do? You start shrinking. You lower your voice. You tell yourself maybe you're just too intense, too impatient, too much. But the truth is, you're not too much. You're just asking someone who isn't enough for you. It's a hard thing to admit. We don't want to believe that someone we care about might not be capable of giving us what we need, especially when we've already invested so much time and energy into trying to make it work. But there's a difference between fighting for love and fighting for someone who's not even on the battlefield with you. You can't build a relationship with someone who only wants the parts of connection that are convenient. You can't grow emotionally with someone who refuses to meet you in your vulnerability, and you definitely can't keep blaming yourself for a dynamic that was never balanced to begin with. When you're constantly being asked to settle, to wait, to understand their lack of effort as just who they are, you begin to internalize their lack as your own. You forget that you once believed in full effort, in real consistency, in love that didn't require so much explaining. You start to view breadcrumbs as a full meal, and the more you do that, the more you starve parts of yourself that once felt whole. It's not weakness to want to be met with intention. It's not neediness to want someone who communicates. It's not impatience to want a relationship that feels mutual. Those are reasonable things to ask for, but when you ask someone who isn't emotionally ready or emotionally willing, those needs start to feel like burdens. Not because they are, but because the person you're asking is too limited to carry anything beyond surface-level connection. There are people who would hear your voice and lean in, not flinch, people who would meet your honesty with openness, not withdrawal. People who don't need to be chased, reminded, or convinced to show up. But you'll never meet those people if you keep exhausting yourself trying to pull emotional water from a dry well. It's not about blaming the other person either, it's about recognizing misalignment. Sometimes people are decent in their own way, but not for you. Sometimes they're kind on the surface, but unavailable underneath. That doesn't make them evil. It just makes them the wrong person for the type of connection you deserve. So before you start rewriting yourself to fit into someone else's capacity, pause. Ask yourself, am I asking the wrong person to meet the right need? Because when the answer is yes, the solution is not to become less. It's to start asking better, not louder. You're not broken. You're just pointing your heart at someone who doesn't know how to hold it. There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that creeps in when you find yourself repeatedly settling for the bare minimum. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts with you giving someone the benefit of the doubt. You excuse the unanswered texts, the half-hearted replies, the plans that always fall through. You tell yourself they're just busy, they're just not good with emotions, they're trying their best. And maybe they are, but the truth is you're trying harder. Eventually you start negotiating, not out loud, but with yourself. You shrink your expectations just a little more each time something doesn't feel right. You convince yourself that having someone who shows up inconsistently is better than having no one at all. You call it compromise, maturity, patience. But deep down, there's a quiet voice that whispers, "This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel like love." It's easy to confuse effort with attachment, to believe that your willingness to work through discomfort somehow guarantees a deeper connection, but effort alone doesn't build a relationship. A relationship isn't built on one person always understanding, always bending, always adapting. It's built on two people who are equally invested in meeting each other in the middle. And if you're the only one walking toward the middle every time, you're not in a relationship, you're in a negotiation with your own self-worth. When we start to settle for the bare minimum, it's rarely because we lack standards. It's often because we're emotionally tied to someone who shows just enough effort to keep our hope alive. A random kind message after days of silence, a late "night I miss you" with no follow-up, a half-committed compliment after a week of emotional distance. These small moments become the currency we trade for our emotional investment. We start measuring love by how much better today feels than yesterday, not by how consistently safe, loved, and seen we feel overall. And then we tell ourselves that it's fine, that love is supposed to be messy, that maybe we're too sensitive, that everyone has flaws, but there's a difference between accepting imperfections and accepting emotional neglect. When you find yourself begging for clarity, for presence, for acknowledgement, and still not getting it, it's not love, it's endurance, and endurance isn't romantic, it's exhausting. Sometimes we hold on to people not because of what they give us, but because of what we hope they'll eventually give us. We fall in love with potential, with versions of them they've never shown consistently. We overanalyze their good days and ignore the patterns in their bad ones. We become emotionally attached to proving we're worth more to someone who has already shown us that they're willing to give less. And so we bargain, we cut our needs down, we stay quiet when something bothers us, we reward them when they finally do the very basics, like replying, apologizing, or simply showing up, and we call that progress. But meeting the bare minimum isn't progress, it's the starting line, and if someone makes you feel like you have to earn even that, then you're not in a partnership. You're playing a game where the rules change every time you get too close to something real. The bare minimum looks like effort to the person who's been starving for consistency, but don't mistake relief for connection. A message sent after days of silence might feel like warmth, but it doesn't rebuild trust. A compliment after criticism doesn't erase the hurt. One good day doesn't cancel out weeks of emotional distance. You deserve more than moments. You deserve momentum. You deserve more than a pulse. You deserve presence. There is no prize for how well you endure a relationship that barely meets your emotional needs. You don't get extra credit for staying longer than you should have. The only thing you walk away with is a quieter version of yourself, the one who stopped asking, who stopped needing, who stopped believing they could be met with love that's consistent and complete. You were not made to chase love. You were not built to constantly prove that you're worth attention. The right connection will not require you to beg for the basics. It will not make you feel like asking for respect is asking for too much. It will feel like breathing, natural, mutual, and secure. So when you find yourself negotiating for emotional scraps, pause. Look at what you're accepting, not just what you're hoping for. Ask yourself whether the love you're fighting for is even love at all, or just the illusion of it, dressed up in excuses and temporary comfort, because once you stop settling for the bare minimum, you make room for something real. Something full, something worthy of the love you've always given. You were never meant to survive off scraps of effort. You were never supposed to prove you're worthy of the very basics of being chosen, respected, loved out loud. If someone makes you feel like asking for that is too much, the issue isn't your standard, it's their capacity. So raise your standards, not your tolerance. Stop negotiating for the bare minimum and start allowing space for the kind of love that doesn't make you question your value. Because the love you keep giving so freely, you deserve that too. Thank you.